Let's get to a Big Ten breakdown now. We count down the top classes in that league. Starting on top, and this was actually changed on our rundown very recently because they have been, much like Florida, on a heater. That's those Oregon Ducks. Oregon with a big-time day-to-day. Dakorien Moore, Naeem Offord. That's a new one there. Dallas Wilson, Brandon Finney, Dorian Brew, Trey McNutt, Zaire Addison, and Emily said this better than I did, but Jaron Kue-Sapatule. Kind of botched that, but who in your mind stands out as like special? If you're an Oregon fan who likes recruiting, but maybe you don't follow it all the time, maybe you're not a 24/7 Sports subscriber, what do they need to know about these guys? Coop, you first.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is they got 4 players in the top 32. 4 5-stars, right? You think about Oregon and how far they've come recruiting-wise under Dan Lanning. That certainly sticks out. I think the biggest thing that sticks out outside of any player is the alignment. The execution here over the last 2 years, not only on the high school side, but on the transfer portal side. And to be able to balance these two things, we talk about it, how much is to what degree the right type of formula. You look at Florida State, you could probably say, hey, they lean into the portal too much. You look at Clemson, you say they probably need to get more involved there. I think you look at Oregon, and this is a team that's starting to kind of figure it out in terms of stacking top 5 recruiting classes and being really aggressive with what they need with veterans in the portal. But outside of that, if you want to get specific, I think keeping Dallas Wilson, getting him out of Florida is huge. I love Zaire Addison in the corners. Brandon Finney is a guy that we have not talked a whole bunch about, but long reactionary athlete from the DMV. To be able to pluck a guy like that, that guy's a bona fide dude, checks a lot of boxes.
With Wilson specifically, I feel like Oregon has a lot of shifty guys, right? But they haven't hit recently on that big-bodied receiver. How could that change their offense?
Yeah, I think it changes it a lot. I mean, Dallas Wilson's one of those guys, 6'2" plus. Andrew Ivins loves his kid, everything he's about. Big physical kid, not the burner, but in terms of at the catch point, he's strong. Big catch radius, tough after the catch as well. And you mentioned it. I mean, it's been more guys like Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart, guys that are a little bit shiftier. The big guy in their offense really kind of been Terrence Ferguson, ironically enough, as a tight end. So you said it. It seems like even in the transfer portal, everybody's looking for these big X bodies. Colby Young. I mean, ironically enough, those are the guys that are kind of really getting overcompensated. It's a premium position in the portal, but this guy, getting him from the high school ranks, got a lot of ability.
Huff, I know you've seen a lot of these guys in person being out west. What do Oregon fans need to know about the rest of that class?
Well, I think if you look at what Oregon has done in Southern California, once again, I mean, that's something that goes back to really what Mario Cristobal was doing at Oregon. I mean, yeah, they had success in Southern California under Chip Kelly and under Mark Helfrich, but it really got ramped up when Cristobal did that. And then now you've got Dan Lanning going back down there, but it's also the national appeal of Oregon. It's the national recruiting. It's going into Maryland. It's going into Florida. It's going into Texas. It's going into Alabama and getting players from those states where they already have major programs in their state and getting them to come to this little town on the western coast of the United States in Eugene and saying, hey, come play here, play in big games, play on a national stage, be a number 1 team, get a first round bye, potentially win a national championship, get marketing, all of that. And they've just done such a great job of just taking what had been really good recruiting classes in the previous decade, taking it up a notch. And I think if you look at, you spent that whole segment talking about how great Dallas Wilson is, we're kind of ignoring the fact they do have the number 1 receiver in the country committed in this class in Dakorien Moore, but then you also now add in a second quarterback in Jaron Kiawe-Sangapolotelo. You had Akili Smith already committed. You've got a running back in Jordan Davison out of Southern California. And then, once again, Oregon has done a fantastic job along the offensive line. That's been something that's been a staple of that program for the last 5 to 7 years. And it's been ramped up these last couple classes with some of the players that they flipped, like Douglas Utu, getting Zach Soskowski from Portland, who was committed to Washington. You go and you hurt your biggest rival's class, and then you add him to your class. And that's now the 4th player from either the Portland or Vancouver area in the last couple of classes in the last 2 years that Oregon has been able to get a lineman from the region. They don't recruit their state that heavily because they're just not the top end talent. There's not the depth in their state to do it. That's why they recruit nationally. But Zach Soskowski made an ascension. You look at this film right here. This is from his first game of the season, which catapulted him into that conversation. And now he's the number 1 player in the state of Oregon. And then right after that film got out, Oregon offered, Michigan offered, Georgia offered, and then the Ducks were able to flip him from Washington despite a late push by Georgia and Michigan. Put a bookmark right here because I think this could be the next great in-state standout for the Ducks, which you got to go back to when they had Brady Breeze and Justin Herbert, who each won a Rose Bowl MVP in the same Rose Bowl, and they were both Oregon products.
All that sounds great, but wait, there's more because Dakorien Moore, the number 1 receiver recruit in the country, might be the number 1 tweeter if he managed to pull this off. He just tweeted at Andrew Olesh, "We're waiting on you, buddy." So If you add Olesh, one of the best tight ends in the country, to this class, then what does Oregon have?
They got everything. When you think about it, I mean, you love the receivers, but I mentioned Terrence Ferguson, probably off to the NFL. Kenyon Sadiq Huff, I know you know him and are a big advocate of his game from Idaho, maybe one of the biggest freaks that we've covered in the last couple of years. But you think about what they've done, and we've talked about this. Like, what are the 3 Ps, right? We talked about protection for a quarterback. We talked about playmaking and play calling as well. All that's established there in Oregon. We talked about Dakorien Moore. We talked about Dallas Wilson, the guys that they're bringing in, the offensive line, Zaire Addison, we didn't even really talk about. They're getting it done, and they are peppering every corner of the plate that you could possibly imagine to build not only a conference championship contender. They're not coming after one year. They're coming after the whole damn thing, and they're trying to build a sustainable product where you have to go through Oregon every single year.